A year from now, the fate of Keir Starmer and the Labour project could hinge on a single electoral moment, the May 2026 ballot. As whispers of revolt ripple through Westminster and betting markets tighten, what looks like routine local contests risk becoming a national reckoning, one that will test party unity, expose strategic fault lines, and force senior figures to choose between loyalty and survival. Against a backdrop of souring polls, regional setbacks, and relentless media scrutiny, the coming months will demand decisive messaging, visible policy wins, and a clarity of purpose that could either steady a government under pressure or trigger a dramatic leadership scramble. The political landscape surrounding Keir Starmer and the Labour Party has become a focal point of intense media scrutiny, with a wide array of outlets assessing his leadership, the party's prospects in upcoming elections, and the internal dynamics that could determine his political future. Across national and regional reporting, commentators and analysts converge on a central theme. 2026 is shaping up as a pivotal year for Starmer and for Labour, with the May elections repeatedly identified as a potential inflection point that could either consolidate his position or precipitate a leadership crisis. Coverage across the collected articles emphasises the mounting pressure from multiple directions. Several pieces frame 2026 as a make-or-break year for Starmer, arguing that electoral performance in local and devolved contests will be interpreted as a referendum on his stewardship of the party and his capacity to deliver on promises made since taking office. Analysts point to polling data and betting markets that have tightened around the question of his longevity, with some outlets reporting that political betting odds and polls now place the likelihood of his departure within the next year as a material possibility. Commentators note that while internal dissatisfaction exists, the dynamics of any leadership challenge are complex and hinge on electoral outcomes, the cohesion of the parliamentary party, and the reactions of Labour's membership and wider voter base. Polling and voter sentiment feature prominently in the coverage. Multiple outlets cite surveys indicating that a significant portion of Labour voters expressed dissatisfaction with Starmer's leadership, with some polls suggesting that roughly 1 in 3 Labour supporters believe he should step down. These figures are used by analysts to argue that the party faces a credibility challenge, retaining the support of its base while appealing to the broader electorate. The reporting underscores that internal party confidence and public perception are not always aligned. A leader can retain the confidence of parliamentary colleagues while losing traction with core voters, or vice versa, and both scenarios carry political risk. The May elections are repeatedly described as a critical test. Several pieces assert that heavy losses in those contests could catalyse calls for change from within the parliamentary party and from influential party figures. While better-than-expected results could stabilise Starmer's position and blunt internal criticism. Political strategists quoted in the coverage emphasise that local election outcomes often serve as a barometer for national sentiment and can trigger rapid shifts in momentum. The reporting also notes that the electoral calendar and the distribution of contests across regions, particularly in England, Scotland, and local authorities, mean that the impact of May's results will be interpreted through multiple lenses, including regional dynamics and the performance of Labour's candidates on the ground. A recurring theme in the articles is the role of prominent Labour figures and potential rivals. Names that appear in the reporting include Wes Streeting and Angela Rayner, among those discussed in replacement markets and internal speculation, as well as other senior party figures whose profiles have risen in recent months. Coverage of these individuals varies. Some pieces assess their readiness to lead, their appeal to different segments of the party and electorate, and the strategic calculations they would face if a leadership contest were to materialise. Analysts caution that the emergence of a credible challenger depends not only on personal ambition, but also on the willingness of MPs and party institutions to back a change, and on the broader political context shaped by election results and public opinion. Commentary from political analysts and former party insiders appears across the reporting, offering a range of perspectives on the likelihood and desirability of leadership change. Some voices argue that a leadership contest could be destabilizing and distract from policy delivery, while others contend that a fresh leader might re-energize the party and present a clearer alternative to the electorate. These assessments frequently stress that structural reforms, policy clarity, and effective communication are necessary regardless of who leads the party. and that internal unity will be essential to withstand the pressures of a challenging electoral cycle. The media coverage also examines the strategic choices facing Starmer and his team. Observers note that the Prime Minister's approach to policy, messaging, and political management will be scrutinised in the run-up to May. With particular attention paid to how the government addresses pressing national issues and how it communicates achievements and priorities to voters. Some articles argue that Starmer must balance the need to consolidate support among Labour's traditional base with the imperative to appeal to swing voters and those disaffected by the current political landscape. This balancing act is portrayed as delicate, leaning too far toward one constituency risks alienating another, and missteps in messaging or policy emphasis could have outsized electoral consequences. Regional dynamics, especially in Scotland, are highlighted as a complicating factor for Labour's national prospects. Coverage points to forecasts and expert commentary suggesting that Labour could face significant challenges in Scottish contests, with some analysts predicting heavy losses that would reverberate across the party and influence perceptions of national leadership. The reporting underscores that Scotland's political environment is distinct and that setbacks there could compound difficulties elsewhere, particularly if they feed narratives of declining support for Labour under Starmer's leadership. Media narratives about Starmer's future are not uniform. Some outlets adopt a more alarmist tone, predicting imminent downfall, while others take a more measured approach, emphasising the contingent nature of political fortunes and the many variables that will determine outcomes. This diversity of framing is evident across the articles, which range from analytical pieces that dissect polling and electoral math to opinion columns that offer sharper judgments about leadership viability. The reporting collectively paints a picture of a leader under pressure, but not necessarily on the brink of collapse, with the decisive factor likely to be the results of the May elections and the party's ability to present a compelling narrative to voters. The coverage also touches on the role of party institutions and influential figures outside the immediate parliamentary leadership. For instance, commentary references the views of party elders, former ministers, and political commentators who weigh in on the strategic choices facing Labour. Some articles highlight interventions from figures such as Lord Hayward and other commentators who suggest that disappointing election results could precipitate calls for change, while others note that senior MPs have warned against premature moves that could destabilise the party further. These contributions from established voices in and around Labour are presented as part of the broader ecosystem, shaping expectations and potential actions. In addition to internal Labour dynamics, the reporting situates Starmer's predicament within the broader national political context. Several pieces consider how opposition parties, media narratives, and public sentiment interact to influence the trajectory of his leadership. Analysts point out that external events, economic developments, international crises, or policy controversies could rapidly alter the political calculus, either exacerbating vulnerabilities or providing opportunities for the government to demonstrate competence. The reporting underscores that leadership fortunes are rarely determined solely by internal party politics. They are also shaped by the government's performance in office and by the broader environment in which political competition unfolds. Finally, the assembled coverage reflects on the human and political costs of prolonged leadership speculation. Several pieces emphasize the toll that constant media attention and internal debate can take on party morale, on the capacity of ministers and officials to focus on governance, and on public confidence in political institutions. At the same time, the reporting acknowledges that political parties are inherently contestable organizations in which leadership is always subject to evaluation and challenge. The articles collectively suggest that while 2026 may be a decisive year for Keir Starmer and Labour, the ultimate outcome will depend on a complex interplay of electoral results, internal cohesion, strategic choices, and external events.